Join ForumIAS Academy, trusted by hundreds of toppers, including IAS Rank 1 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐥.
Hello and welcome to ForumIAS. Today is 13th July 2023 and these are all the articles that we are going to see today. The first article is about South China Sea. This is a news because of the 5th meeting of the India-Philippines Joint Commission on Bilateral Cooperation. So what were the outcomes of this India-Philippines Joint Commission, whose meeting was recently concluded? The outcomes were, the first thing was to open a resident defense attaché office in Manila, which means an Indian defense personnel will be a defense attaché in Philippines, and that Indian defense personnel would have a separate office, that is the office of the defense attaché. So that is the first outcome. Second outcome is boosting cooperation between coast guards of the two countries. Next is acquisition of naval assets by Manila under concessional line of credit from Delhi. Line of credit is, say for example, in this case India promises 50,000 crores. Okay, so India doesn't right away give this amount to Philippines. What happens is, as and when needed, Philippines can activate this and get money from India as and when needed up to a limit of 50,000 crore for purchasing naval assets from India. So that is what it means by line of credit. Expansion of training and joint exercises on maritime security as well as disaster response. And there will be a maritime dialogue which will happen regularly. And above all that, one important outcome was by India. India said that everyone should respect the 2016 arbitral award on the South China Sea. Usually, India doesn't have a strong stance on these issues, but now India asserting that everyone should respect the 2016 arbitral award on South China Sea, it is quite unusual. So that is why an editorial article has also come in on this topic. So first we need to understand the South China Sea issue. Let me show you the map. Here we have the map. Here we have Philippines. So this is the South China Sea region and this is the 9-dash line. So you have 9 dashes here and that demarcates China's claims. China has developed this concept of 9-dash line and they say that whatever is the area that is enclosed within the 9-dash line belongs to China. Against this claim, Philippines filed a case in the PCA. PCA means Permanent Court of Arbitration. PCA is situated at Hague in the Netherlands. So Philippines filed a case against it and in 2016 the arbitral award came in and it came in favor of Philippines. So the PCA, that is the Permanent Court of Arbitration, they denied China's assertion that it had historical rights. Why China developed this concept of 9-dash line was that China claimed that they had historical rights over the South China Sea. In the past, there have been active usage of this region by the Chinese Empire, but PCA has rejected this claim and unanimous decision was in Philippines' favor, which I already mentioned. Any prior claims to resources situated inside the 9 dash line were unfounded. I already showed you the 9 dash line. The PCA said that any claims for resources inside the 9 dash line, it was unfounded. Okay. The tribunal determined that development and land reclamation had fundamentally changed the reefs in contravention of UNCLOS commitments, UNCLOS commitments. UNCLOS stands for United Nations Convention on Law of Seas. So that is UNCLOS. So according to UNCLOS only, we classify different regions as EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone. We define territorial sea, high sea. That is all defined according to the UNCLOS, this convention. They say what can be the limit of a nation state with respect to claim on EEZ. What can be the claim of a state on the territorial sea? Say for example, imagine this is South India. From the coastline, 12 nautical mile is the territorial sea. This territorial sea. Beyond 12 to 200 nautical miles is the EEZ, that is the Exclusive Economic Zone. So in the territorial sea, it is like the territory of a country itself. The Exclusive Economic Zone, a country has claim on the resources, whether it is on the ocean bed or in the water column. So this is given by the UNCLOS. So what happened was, here you can see in this map, we have Paracel Islands, Spratly Islands. In these islands, what China did was they created artificial islands. They reclaimed land and they constructed infrastructure in these regions, which is wrong because technically South China Sea does not belong to China. It is common between the countries that are bordering the South China Sea. So, the Permanent Court of Arbitration says that this land reclamation has fundamentally changed the reefs in contravention of UNCLOS commitments. Reefs are these islands. There are many natural islands as well as coral reefs in the South China Sea. Because of the artificial island construction of China, this land reclamation, it had fundamentally changed the reefs in contravention to the UNCLOS commitments. Further, the Permanent Court of Arbitration said that China has inflicted irreparable harm to the maritime environment. In addition to destroying evidence of natural condition of features in the South China Sea, because China has developed so many artificial islands, what used to be sea at one point of time has become an island of China, and it is difficult to establish whether a particular island was artificially created by China or it was already in presence. If that island was already in presence, right? There is an island in the South China Sea and it is already there, then it will have an exclusive economic zone corresponding to it. If China has created a new artificial island, it will not have such a claim, right? But the problem is, it is indistinguishable between a natural island and an artificial island created by China. Okay, and China has also violated the sovereign rights of Philippines in its exclusive economic zone. Why? Because if you see here, this is the island of Philippines. I have labeled it, right? So this is the island of Philippines. They will have an EEZ. So what happens? China has come and it has exploited the EEZ of Philippines, which is in contravention of the UNCLOS. That is what the Permanent Court of Arbitration says. Interfering with Philippines' fishing and petroleum exploration, constructing artificial islands, failing to stop Chinese fishermen from fishing in the zone, that is the EEZ of Philippines, in which Filipino fishermen, they have the claim. Instead, Chinese fishermen are coming and fishing in the South China Sea, which happens to be in the EEZ of Philippines, which is in contravention of the UNCLOS, that is the UNCLOS. So that is the original problem, and there came a ruling also, but it has not yet been implemented. So what needs to be done in this regard? This South China Sea here, so here we have the Malacca Strait, right? Malacca Strait. So if someone is coming from a ship or a vessel is coming from Indian Ocean region, they have to pass through Malacca Strait, and then they have to pass through the South China Sea, and then only they can get to countries like China, Japan, Korea, etc. So it is a maritime gateway and junction for shipping between the Pacific and Indian Oceans. So from the Indian Ocean, a vessel is coming, it is passing through the Malacca Strait, and it passes through South China Sea, and it can reach the Pacific Ocean in this side, right? That is why this South China Sea, it is a gateway, it is a maritime gateway. It is the border between, it is the junction between the Indian Ocean on this side and Pacific Ocean on the other side. So this area is very important. If there is any confrontation in South China Sea, then there will be danger to regional and global security, because the maritime lanes of communication will be choked. How can goods go? How can ships go to and from Indian Ocean to Pacific Ocean? That would become difficult because there is a conflict in the South China Sea. A free and stable marine commons are crucial to global trade and economy. The sea lanes of communication, the maritime routes, they should be peaceful. Then only the global trade can flourish. Global supply chains can flourish. Then only we'll have a normal life. Otherwise, what happened during COVID? Communication was disrupted. Transportation was disrupted. And as a result, there was huge inflation, right? Such a thing might happen if there is a conflict in South China Sea, because it will choke the important point, important maritime navigation route. So there is a dialogue that is needed. And what can be the way forward? ASEAN is the way forward. Association or Southeast Asian nations, which includes countries like Indonesia, Myanmar, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, etc. There are 10 countries in the ASEAN group. So they have locus standi. They border the South China Sea. So they can have a dialogue with China. They can use quiet diplomacy. They can negotiate. They can have a talk. They can pursue peaceful means for getting a solution to the South China Sea conflict, because the legal framework that is going to PCA, Permanent Court of Arbitration, it failed. Instead of that, there can be diplomacy and there can be a political framework that would help in establishing the claims of China and balancing it with other Southeast Asian countries, so that this maritime navigation route is free of any conflict. So all in all, this article talks about the importance of South China Sea, what was the history, what was the problem, and what should be the way forward and how to carry it out. All these things are explained in this article. We'll go to the next article. It is about the National Research Foundation. In the upcoming monsoon session of Parliament, National Research Foundation Bill will be introduced. In this context, we have to know about the National Research Foundation. Why there is a NRF or National Research Foundation? It was based on the recommendations of the National Education Policy 2020. So what is this NRF? It will be a coordinating agency between researchers, government bodies and industry. So imagine this NRF in a triangle. So on one hand there are researchers, on one hand there are government bodies, and on the other hand there is industry. Between these three entities, the National Research Foundation will collaborate. So industry is also brought into mainstream of research. And this NRF, they will provide research grants to individuals. Apart from giving grants to individuals, NRF will grow, it will seed, that is, it will give funding and it will facilitate research in India's universities, especially state universities. Not only by funding researchers, but also funding research infrastructure. So basically, NRF is a coordinating body. Okay. How will it be funded? The proposed funding is 50,000 crores for 5 years, and out of this 28%, that is 14,000 crore, will be government share, and remaining 72% will come from the private sector. But how is this 72% going to be raised? That is a bit unclear now. Let us see what rules does the government come up with in order to implement this bill. So in our country, the nation's gross domestic expenditure on research and development, GERD, that is research expenditure, there has been a raise, but this raise itself is too meager. So for example, if we compare India's GDP to that of US and China, India's GDP is 7.6 times smaller than the GDP of US, and India's GDP is 5 times smaller than the GDP of China. But proportionately, if we see, India's research expenditure was nearly 24 times less than both these countries. So the gap between GDP is less, but the gap between research spending of India and that of US and China is very, very high. That shows how little India is spending on research and development, how less India is spending on facilitating research. So the aim of this NRF to improve ease of doing science. What and all features have to be there in NRF so that it improves this ease of doing science? First thing is, when a researcher applies for a research grant, the time between application and the time that the researcher receives the money, this time gap, it should be minimal, and preferably it should be 6 months. As soon as applying for a research grant, the particular researcher should get the money maximum by 6 months. And all the paperwork should be digitally processed. So it will be easier for researchers to gain funding without sending any stacks of papers or hard copies to the NRF. And whatever is the finance related query, that will be processed through the university's finance department rather than the researcher itself. The researcher doesn't know how to handle finances, or they are rather too busy to handle finances, and the researcher will concentrate on research. Whatever the funding related queries, that will be between the National Research Foundation and the respective universities' finance departments. Next, generally for any government department there are spending guidelines, but this NRF should have explicit spending guidelines that is different from that of other institutions, other government bodies, because scientific research, it needs independent guidelines for spending money. Money for research can overshoot at times. It might be needed on an urgent basis. So in that case, the policy for spending money in research should be different from that of other departments in the government, so that there is enough flexibility and also there is accountability of scientists. And as we said earlier, the release of money needs to be timely. Whether the NRF is funding an individual researcher or the NRF is funding an institution, a research institution, whatever may be the case, the funding must be released quickly. So these are all some of the measures that would enable NRF to facilitate ease of doing science. Next article, it talks about Supreme Court getting 2 new judges. This is the news of today. What we need to know is how are judges appointed. So what are the qualifications for appointment as a judge? Article 124 clause 3 of the Constitution talks about appointment of judges. So a person can be appointed as a judge of a Supreme Court if he or she, the first condition is that they must be a citizen of India. Second, they must have been serving a high court as a judge for at least 5 years or 2 such courts in succession. If they are not serving as judge for 5 years, they should have been an advocate in an high court for at least 10 years. And the fourth condition is distinguished jurist in the opinion of the president. These are all the qualifications of appointing Supreme Court judges, and these qualifications are laid out in the Constitution. And judges of higher judiciary are appointed through collegium system. What is this collegium? Collegium is a group and it consists of the Chief Justice of India and 4 senior most judges of the Supreme Court. And this collegium, this group, decides on the appointments, elevations, that is promotion, elevation of a judge from a high court to Supreme Court, transfer of judges. On all these things, this collegium decides. And this word collegium, it is not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. And this system of appointment, that is the collegium system, developed as a result of judicial pronouncements. There is first judge's case. There is second judge's case. Third judge's case. So through these 3 cases, step by step, the policy of appointing judges underwent a change. And as a result of the judges' cases, the collegium system has come about. Okay. That is it for this article. Next article is about the IIP, that is the Index of Industrial Production. This article says IIP rises 5.2% and this rise is because of infrastructure development. Now we need to know what is IIP. So IIP, it measures the change in volume of production of industrial products during a given period. How much volume of production has changed? Say there is June 2023. How much the volume of production has changed in comparison to June 2022? So, the volume of production change in these 2 periods is measured by IIP. The Index of Industrial Production, it is published monthly by National Statistical Office. And this NSO, it comes under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So, what are all the industries that are tracked under this index? There are some broad sectors like mining sector, manufacturing sector, electricity sector, and there are some use-based sectors like basic goods, capital goods, intermediate goods. Based on that, the different categories are tracked in the IIP. IIP, Index of Industrial Production. And the base year for IIP is 2011 to 2012. Why this IIP is needed? What is the significance of it? It is used for policy making purposes. If the IIP rises or falls, it shows the success or failure of policy measures, and accordingly, policy tweaks can be made possible. Relevant for the calculation of quarterly and advanced GDP estimates, because GDP is the total amount of goods and services produced within a territory of a country in a particular year. So this IIP also measures the change in the production only. So IIP data can be useful in advanced estimation of GDP also. So IIP, it measures the industrial production in some sectors, and out of that there are 8 core sectors. Okay, so there are many subheadings under this IIP, and the 8 core sectors are comprising of 40.27% of the weight of items. So in IIP there will be one sector, say let us take mining. Then we have steel sector. Then we have electricity. Then we have capital goods. Like this, we have many subheadings, many industries that are measured using IIP. And each industry, they have a corresponding weight. Say for example, mining is given a weight of 1.5. Steel is given a weight of 2. Like that. This is just an assumption. So what they are saying is, there are 8 core sectors, and these 8 core sectors, they collectively comprise 40.27% of the weight of items included in IIP. Okay, and these 8 core sectors, or what and all are the 8 core sectors depending on the weights, it is arranged here in ascending order. Out of these, refinery products have highest weight. Then second place is for electricity. Among these 8, fertilizers have the lowest weight. So this can be asked sometimes, out of the 8 core sectors, which sector has the lowest weight in the IIP? That is fertilizer. Highest is refinery, second highest is electricity. So this is about the IIP. Next article, it talks about a research paper, or in general a research idea. It says that welfare schemes may help poor children's brain grow normally. What is it and how is it relevant for India? That we will see. See, reading through this whole article is not necessary because we can't match it directly to our syllabus. In some cases, we can use this as a case study in ethics paper. GS4 ethics paper. So that is why I have picked this article. So I'll just mention the gist of this article and how can you use it in your ethics paper. So poverty and brain development. So the children and young adults who are growing up in low income families, they have lower cortical volume. Cortex is the outer layer of brain, and by virtue of them having lower cortical volume, it meant that they did relatively poorly in tests that are designed to measure academic performance. Then there is another layer of the brain called as hippocampus, and it is deep seated within the brain structure, and it is the center for learning and memory. It is responsible for how a person learns, how memory operates in a person. And this also correlated positively with a family's socio-economic status. That is, higher the socio-economic status, better is the volume of hippocampus. So there is a relation between how poor a person is and how well the brain gets developed. Okay. Children growing up in low-income families indeed risk a smaller hippocampus. Like I already said, poor families, smaller hippocampus. So, how to combat this? The brain development of the child itself is getting affected. But if there is a state support, then there is a better outcome in terms of cognitive development and brain development. So in this particular article, they discuss about a research paper in which it is mentioned that even though a child is living in a low income household, in a higher cost of living state if the particular family received generous cash benefits from the government. The hippocampal volumes were on an average 34% larger than who lived in low income households with a relatively higher cost of living, right? So that is the beauty of how state support can develop brain and how it can help a person to come out of poverty. If there is state support, then the child will get a relatively better standard of living. And if the child gets a relatively better standard of living, they can develop their brain. Their brain gets developed in a healthy way, and as a result, they can make progress in their school education and they can make progress in their lives eventually. So, even though a poor child is at a disadvantageous position, if there is state support, that disadvantage can to an extent be mitigated. That is what is mentioned. But again, often the poorer households belong to disadvantaged categories. So, if we take the case of America, generally poor families are black families. In India, generally the poor families belong to the OBC, SC, ST categories, right? So, it is not just about poverty, it also is determined by the social composition. Because these sections of society are more prone to be poor, they require more state support and hand-holding if they have to come out of generational poverty. Okay, so this can be quoted in ethics. There can be a question about how reservation or affirmative action helps in development of a nation or a population as a whole, or there can be a case study in which there might be a disadvantaged section child who is in need, and there you can quote such studies that will improve the authenticity of your answer. Okay, that's it for the articles. We'll discuss some questions. Consider the following statements. The Rajya Sabha has no power either to reject or to amend a money bill. Yes, that is right. Maximum Rajya Sabha has 14 days time to deliberate on the money bill, and after that they have to send it back to the Lok Sabha. Otherwise, it is deemed to have passed in the form that the Lok Sabha originally passed it in. Right? So, Rajya Sabha has no power to reject or to amend a money bill. Rajya Sabha cannot vote on demand for grants. This is also correct. Rajya Sabha cannot discuss the annual financial statement, which is the budget. This is wrong. There can be discussion in Rajya Sabha, but the voting on demands for grants will happen only in Lok Sabha. And they are asking which of the following statements are correct. 1 and 2 are only correct. Next question. Which of the following brings out consumer price index number for industrial workers? This is brought about by the Labour Bureau. This is a fact-based question. Either you know the answer or you don't know the answer. Next question. The terms agreement on agriculture, agreement on the application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, peace clause appear in the news frequently in the context of affairs of A. Food and Agriculture Organization FAO, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, WTO, that is the World Trade Organization, and then UNEP, United Nations Environment Program. The correct answer is World Trade Organization. These terms are in use in relation to India giving agricultural subsidies. Okay. So that's it for today's discussion. Follow us on all the social media channels. This is Indumathi signing off. Thank you. All the best.